Hello, everybody. Well, as you probably know, that this is, I got kicked out of Facebook Live today. According to Facebook, I talked twice as fast as a normal person talks, whatever that means. And they thought I was a robot and way too fast of a talker. So I got blocked from any Facebook Lives until they can go back and watch everything and realize that I'm just a really fast talker. I don't know if I'm like insulted or if I'm complimented by this, but I'm still kind of navigating how I feel about the whole situation. Anyway, here's the scoop. So you can't stop me. I promised that I would get this content out. So I'm getting this content out. So here's the scoop. I'm going to start off with where from the beginning again. So I am going to talk fast. Too bad. Facebook cannot control this one because I'm recording it on Zoom and I'm uploading it for you guys as well. So I'm going to go back to it. Is that the book that I'm referencing today, where a lot of this great content came from, was actually by Ruth Soukup, S-O-U-K-U-P, and it's actually called Do It Scared. It's a great book. I like to do a lot of neuroscience work and like read a lot about how the brain works and everything. She does a really good job of, I don't want to say dumbing it down, but it is. And sometimes for me, I need to sort of get that point before I evolve into something a little bit more complex. And this was a really good book for that. So anyway, long story short, the whole context of this is that there's a lot of different fears that you hear about. You hear about fear of this or fear of that, like fear of success, fear of failure. But the concept of this book that, this content is actually coming from is really about, how fear manifests itself in us. And what it talks about is it says, look, everybody actually has fear. I mean, that's normal. I mean, I don't know why people are always trying to be like, be fearless, be fearless. You can't actually be fearless. It's not possible. We should all be scared of things. I mean, it's normal. So I think, for myself, I love fear. So I've learned to embrace fear. But what they talk about in the book is they talk about the fact that fear manifests itself in us in 7 different formats. And so I'm going to explain the 7 different types of formats that it manifests itself. And what you'll realize is we are all 7. So everybody should resonate with all 7. But ultimately what you really want to look at is which one stands out the most for you. So even though you'll be able to resonate with all 7 of them, there's one that's going to stand out pretty aggressively for you. And that's the one that you really want to dumpster dive into and say, okay, that's the one that, I really should focus on. Because when you establish what your main manifested fear is, then you can actually start the process of change with it. Everything is overcomable. I mean, we're born with the ability to have fear, but which one manifests the most in us is usually a learned behavior. So let's start off with the procrastinator. Those of you who attended our Facebook Live before I got shut down for talking too fast, the procrastinator is one of my favorite ones. And what you're looking for is that the procrastinator often obsesses with the end product or outcome or whatever it is that they're doing. And what happens with the procrastinators, they insist on it being perfect. So you get that all the time. It's a person who really insists on being perfect. And because of this, they spend too much time typically planning and researching instead of just diving in. And, the example I used on Facebook Live was like, I don't think twice about things. I don't procrastinate on things. I do have some areas, like I said, we're all going to have things that we resonate with today, but I don't procrastinate. I just dive right in and I'm like, let's go. But a procrastinator really focuses on all those details and is like, okay, you know what? It has to be perfect before we do it. And you ran into those people if you're planning a vacation or something, they'll be the procrastinator. You're like, did you book it yet? No, I have to research this flight. It has everything has to be the perfect and that's not going to give us enough time to transfer this airplane to that airplane. And I'm not saying there's not a place for it, but in the business world, if you procrastinate too much, one of the biggest things is they hold themselves back from ever getting started in the first place. So you can have the most epically talented person, and they're trying to psychoanalyze themselves saying, why am I not doing this? Well, ask yourself the question, am I focused on everything being perfect? Because if you are, that's going to slow you down. And we call that, have you ever heard of, what's the saying? How does it go? It's oh gosh, I'm drawing a blank on it. But anyway, it says, procrastination leads to never doing something. And it, analysis paralysis, that's it. So analysis paralysis is what we're really referring to in that one. And for procrastinators, the biggest thing, if that's the one that's going to stand out the most to you, is that you want to push past the fear of starting. Okay, it's that starting momentum that you've got to push past. Okay, so getting started may feel like this massive hill that you actually have to climb, but you can't edit or revise something that doesn't doesn't exist. Okay, so meaning like if you're always analyzing something, it's because, you know what, in your head you're just going over and over and over again, but it doesn't actually exist. So you have to sort of almost look at it as a procrastinator and say, okay, I can still have this quality and this, you know, this fear of everything not being perfect, but I got to at least start, and let's base it on factual, real things that are happening instead of fictitious, you know, item that hasn't happened yet. And be careful not to place energy into having a perfectly finished product. Okay, because if you do that, you know, kind of go into the other side and say, I'm going to really want that, but I'm willing to troubleshoot along the way. And that's all you have to do if you're working with procrastination as one of your fears in business, is to say, okay, I just need to get started. And if I get started, you know, then we can start analyzing everything later. And I think that that's, by the way, not really sure why the lighting keeps changing, but it does. So anyway, it is what it is. The second one that you're looking at is, we were diving into, is what we refer to as the rule follower. Okay. And the rule follower is an interesting one. I ran into that. I was saying an example from the weekend where, you know, a running group, you know, we were trying to organize it, and the person kept saying, well, the store hours are only 8 hours, not 12. So we can't do the running group. And I'm like, well, I don't understand. Why don't you just change the hours of the running group to match the hours of the store? The person's like, no, we cannot do that. And I'm like, why? And they're like, well, because you know what? Doesn't fall within the rules, and we all have to play on the same rules. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like that person is holding themselves back. So literally the rule follower is that person who's dedicated to following distinct rules. And then the guidelines that go around with those rules make it even crazier, because they're set in stone around them. And then they're obsessed with always, you know, basically taking those rules and making the right decision. So they always want to make the air quote right decision. And despite the potential effects that they have on their own businesses and their own success, they're always saying, but the rules state this, and I know I could be more successful, or we could have a really great running group, for example, but the rules stipulate this. And it's like, okay. So self-compassion is where we generally go with those individuals who are rule followers, is we give them permission, you know, leading them into self-compassion, allowing them the opportunity in the space to possibly make wrong decisions. So you get it, rule followers like to do the right thing, which is admirable, by the way, but it holds them back. And so what we try to do is self-compassion that says, okay, you may change the hours, it may be a total failure, and yeah, you might peeve off some people, you know, that can't do what you can do with the clinics or the running groups, but guess what? You know what? It's going to be okay. Even if things don't go right, everything's going to be okay. Like, what's really going to happen? You know, give some self-compassion. You don't always have to be right all the time. You're human, okay? And it's important to find your own set of guiding principles instead of always leaning on outside factors and others to make those decisions for you. And so allow yourself to have the space to make wrong decisions if you're a rule follower. It's very, very hard. I get it, but it holds you back from massive success and massive growth and change. So really embrace it. And I think you'll see that there's some great things that come from that. And you'll know if you're a rule follower, because you're the type of person who, again, you're always referencing the rules. Got to follow them. We got to do this the right way. Okay. There is growth happens when you can get outside of that. The third thing is one of my favorites. It's called the people pleaser. And a lot of people don't understand how that can hold you back, but those are the people pleasers are the type of style that they struggle with the fear of being judged. And, you know, also they equally struggle with the fact that they, you know, they disappoint others, right? So it's like they don't want to disappoint others. They don't want to be judged, but they have a hard time setting clear boundaries and just saying no. They're the yes people. Yes, 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 yes. And they don't often come to the table and say no. So having boundaries often sounds scary to someone who is used to that, and they're, you know, to putting other people before themselves first. This can be a scary one to overcome. So although it often comes from a genuine and thoughtful place, being a people pleaser, it can lead your own self into the least priority. So it puts yourself second and third and fourth. It doesn't put, you know, putting everybody else ahead of you means that you're not ahead. Okay, it means that you're putting yourself in the back. So you want to, you know, you can't pour from an empty cup. That's kind of one thing that we hear a lot, is you can't pour from an empty cup. And what that means is when you're in tune with your own wants and desires, you become better. You just do. So you can actually put others, you know, first in after yourself, okay? But you'll be a better person for it, okay? Because also, you have to take care of yourself, and sometimes take care of your business, and the only way to learn is to improve in other areas. So this can be a really big one. And what you have to remember with people who are people pleasers is, if that's you, you got to put yourself, you deserve to be a priority. Your business deserves to be a priority. Like, so if you're putting others first and you're always doing that, like, I struggle, some people pleasers in business would be, if I tell them take a day off in your business and they're like, I can't do it. I got to help because the client needs to go see a house. Listen, you're a priority. Put yourself first, if that's how it is. Or somebody who says, I want to hire a buyer agent because I'm like super busy and super slammed. I get that. But again, your fear of pleasing everybody is holding you back. You want to be a people pleaser, so it's holding you back from growing because you seem to think that your clients or everybody are going to be upset that you pass them to a buyer agent. And that's a people pleaser behavior that holds a lot of clients back. When I talk to them and they say, yeah, I got a buyer agent, but you know what? I don't want to pass a client to it because, it's not me. And I'm like, okay, I get it. It's a people pleaser thing. The next one is the outcast. Okay. So the outcast is one of my favorite ones. It's, the outcast may appear to be fearless on the outside. They're like, I'm fearless. I'm like this, but on the inside, their biggest fear is rejection. That is their biggest fear. Therefore, they often try to reject everybody else around them in their business and their lives and everything else like that, so they don't get hurt. And it's really interesting because it's very hard to find those, like, determine if that's really the case with people. And the advice with people like that really comes down to taking the time to ask yourself, are you focusing on worst case scenarios too much? The outcasts generally do that, and they focus on worst case scenarios. Well, if I do this, I'm not going to get that, or this person's going to screw me over, so that's how it's going to be. So oftentimes, if you only think about, how poor an outcome is going to be, then you overlook the benefits of any situation. So that outcast has that tough, tough, fearless, I can do anything shell, but they're so afraid of being rejected that they don't push themselves to try new things or do new things because they're always seeing it as the worst case scenario. Like, you know what? I'm not going to do a Facebook Live because guess what? Everybody's going to judge me, or I'm going to be rejected, or nobody's going to show up, or whatever the case is. And that's not the case, right? So you have to kind of look at that. So giving others a chance and giving opportunity for people to come into your circle and see the good things could really help you. And what you have to do is look for evidence so that you can trust others, so you can experience it. So like, if you're thinking that you're going to get rejected and you want to bulletproof it, invite 10 of your great friends to attend Facebook Live or whatever the case is, and then, bulletproof it. But the point is like, if you always are thinking about the worst case scenario, then that is going to hold you back, consistently. You have to throw caution to the wind and really trust in the process. So the outcast can be a really tough one. The self-doubter, that's a big one. Okay. I think as we move on to our last three here, I think you're going to see, like, the self-doubter is, it's dominated by the fear of not being good enough. Okay. So like imposter syndrome, right? Those who self-doubt, they tend to feel like a lot of insecurity about their capabilities, and they can sometimes find it difficult to put themselves out there. On the flip side, they judge others to mask their own fears. So it's really interesting to see that. Those who self-doubt are usually the hardest workers, and I see that a lot, okay? And they put forth a lot of effort to overcome their fear of not being good enough. Okay. And that is a big one. And I bet you a lot of you are going, oh my gosh, I think that's me. I think this is it. Well, wait, we still have two more. So give yourselves a chance. But anyway, but the point is that when you feel like you're not good enough, that imposter syndrome, that self-doubter, okay, that's just like, it's not reality. So a good way to overcome it is to step out of your comfort zone every once in a while. Not all the time, okay? Like, let's be real here, baby steps. But you want to get out of it every now and then, and you want to take note of the outcome. What happens, and don't forget it, because it's a pattern behavior. So you really want to rush out there and say, okay, when I step out of my comfort zone and I do something, always recognize, how is the outcome? Was it awesome? Was it not awesome? Like, what is it, right? So when you practice being, proactive about your life, you're going to be surprised to see what you're actually capable of. And that's like anybody who's struggling with imposter syndrome. That's what I usually suggest. I'm like, just try it, baby steps, little baby steps. Just put yourself out there, take a note, you see what it is. If it's, I will be honest with you, the self-doubter to be honest with you, that's the one that leads the most with me, is that I know I have the qualities, the skills and everything, but I self-doubt sometimes whether, what am I saying? Like, all through COVID, I had to get out there and really, guide people, and it was scary. And, I was like, I don't know if I can do this. Like, I'm so worried that I'm going to be out there, and you know what? And then it's going to be difficult for me. So I have to, am I going to be good enough to lead all these agents through COVID? And the truth is I did exactly what I'm recommending. I stepped out there. I did one. It had a great impact. Lots of people came back to me. I wrote it all down. I was like, okay, I'm going to do it again. And I'm going to do it again. And now 2 years later, look where it's led. It's excellent. And, so the results aren't always going to be perfect, but at the end of the day, they're not really what we think they are. Okay. You are good enough. And you know what? Listen to that little voice in your head that's giving you the idea before you listen to the self-doubter one. Okay. The next one is called the excuse maker. All right, one of my favorites. I love the excuse maker. Okay, so those who can identify with being an excuse maker is that they have difficulty taking responsibility for their own choices and goals. So what they do is they make up 100 different excuses as to why they're not hitting their targets or their goals, and they literally blame everybody else. Okay, so instead of stepping up to lead every once in a while, they find themselves taking a back seat to avoid accountability. So they allow others to make decisions in their own lives. So like, I'll get it in coaching sometimes. People be like, oh, do me a favor, send me exactly what you want me to do every week. And I'm like, okay, and then I'll do it. And then when they won't do it, they'll be like, well, that's because you know what, you were a day late sending it to me. So that's why it didn't get done. And then you'll be like, wait a second, what does that have to do with it? And you know what? They're always making an excuse as to why they're not at fault, but everybody else is. Or, oh, I have life drama happening. So you know what? That's why I didn't hit my goals this week. Okay, no problem. Let's dissect that a little bit. How in the world did you have time to go to that dinner party, but you didn't have time to do this? Like, okay, come on. So the excuse maker is a tough one. And I don't want to belittle it, but it always is a frustrating point with a coach because you're trying to move them forward. But going with the flow can be tempting because you don't feel responsible for negative outcomes. I mean, who really wants to be responsible for a negative outcome? I don't. Okay, but the truth is I've been in many triathlon races, for example, and I've shit the bed in nutrition. And you know what? What happens? You think I bonk out or something happens, I can make 100 excuses, or I can step out of the zone and just say, you know what, is none of the above. I shit the bed on nutrition. I know I did, and that's how it is. So the reality is that even if being passive in choices, oftentimes it can be difficult when you meet a goal, but you know what, you can if you're not actively moving in a direction. So you have to recognize why you're not doing it. Allowing others to make decisions for you is tricky because they don't always value your best interest. So for example, I might say to a coaching client, here's all the things you need to do in a week because they've asked me to do that. But then when they don't hit it, they're using the coach as the excuse. Reality, it's them, but that's the pattern that we have. How does a coach know what's in your best interest if you're making them do your schedule for the week? It doesn't make sense, right? So it's like you can try it a few times, but often what I see is, again, the excuse pattern shows up. So there's a great pride. What you want to look at is I suggest setting smaller goals. So what you'll see in that is don't let somebody else set them. Come up with smaller goals with your coach or with whoever your accountability partners with, and then stick with them. And that will start allowing you to see, okay, my smaller goals I'm hitting, I've established it. There's no excuse for it. I made it happen. There's great pride when you accomplish something that you set out to do and versus what somebody else did. And you can also ask a friend who is really good at doing that to help you stay accountable to it and plan some shorter term goals with them as well. But again, you guys have heard me do the SMART goals where there's specific measurable goals. That works out really well. But just keep in mind with excuse makers, I want you to really remember breaking down each of your goals, you're going to be able to structure it, have it trackable as well. Don't overwhelm yourself when you start. Okay, just simply ask yourself, how can I improve in small ways to give yourself small wins, and then stop making excuses for why you're not hitting there. Okay, very, very big one with a lot of people who enter into coaching is that profile. We see it quite a bit. And the last one is going to be the pessimist. And you know what? The pessimist is, somebody who struggles with fear of adversity and hardship. Okay, so usually it's use. The pessimist usually has something in their background, according to the research, that is trauma or difficulty. So it's a reason why they think pessimistically, and those are the ones who kind of feel like they're victimized by everything that happens. And by the way, that feeling is not BS. That's a rightly so feeling. So I don't want to negate what the pessimist has gone through in their lives to create that behavior in them, or that fear, and again, this is a manifestation of that fear in general, is they become pessimistic. But what happens with that is that a pessimist can tend to look at the hardships as a stop sign and a reason to give up. That's the challenge with this profile that you can have, is that it's not that what you've experienced is not relevant, and it's not that you haven't been through trauma or difficulties. I mean, I can definitely attest to that. I've been through a lot myself, and at the end of the day, it's like, sure, I mean, that definitely makes me see things in a different lens, I guess you could say. So it's not like it's not true, and it's not like it's not valid, but you can't look at it as a stopgap to succeeding, and you can't look at it as a U-turn to give up. Okay, you have to be able to kind of practice looking at the hardships as a stepping stone, or a lesson. And I was giving a great financial presentation a while back, and I was staying on stage, and that was with Grant Cardone. And I said, you know what? By the way, that wasn't like a name drop. I hope you picked up on that. But so anyway, I gotta have a sense of humor. I'm doing this at the end of my day. Anyway, so like I was saying is that I was standing on stage, and I said, when my mom had died, that was a really difficult time for me. That was terrible, and it made me really bitter. It made me angry. It made me, why me? None of my friends, at that point in my life had mom who died. And if you know my story, it catapulted into some really tragic events, because it was very unexpected. And anyway, long story short, what I did is I stood on stage, and I said, what I saw that for is, I said, look, you can have two ways to look at it. Either I got a really great mom who I think I turned out really great. I think so. I mean, I have really bad habits, some of them, like, I hate making my bed. I like, whatever. But, I've been on my own for a long time. So there's things that I've picked up that maybe aren't exactly the best. But anyhow, the long story short is, what I talk about is, I say, look, I either can look at it as like, the world sucks, and you took my mom, my best friend, away from me at a young age, and I was pretty much, just devastated by it, and it catapulted to a series of really shitty things that happened in my life. Or I can look at it as the opposite, and I can say, I had a great mom for longer than some people who've had a mom their whole life, and she was better in the short time that I had her, as opposed to some people that can't stand their moms and they're still alive. So it's like, I can look at this situation in two different ways. And when I presented it like that, there was a girl, I'll never forget her. She came to me after the session with her husband, and she was in tears. And she says, I just want to tell you something. She goes, I lost my mom years ago too. And she goes, same as you. And she goes, I've been so angry my whole life, and I have just really stopped growing, stopped wanting more, because I'm like so angry with shit. And she's like, but I just wanted to tell you, you were right. She goes, I had the best mom, and it sucks what happened, but I would take that over a shitty mom my whole life. And she goes, I've never seen it that way. She goes, I've been in therapy for like 15, 20 years, whatever it was. And she's like, that changed my world. She goes, that's it. I'm done. You know what? I got to appreciate what I was given. And she's like, and see it in a different lens. And I was like, that's it, man. That's it. Doesn't mean it doesn't suck what happened. It doesn't mean it wasn't traumatizing. It does not negate what you went through. But what it does allow you to do is see what lesson you learned from it. What did it give you as a stepping stone to make you stronger? And instead, don't use it as a roadblock. Use it as a superpower to move forward and be like, look, you overcame it. There is a positive there. You wouldn't hurt so much if you had a terrible mom. You wouldn't, I wouldn't hurt so much if I had a terrible mom. I might be a little messed up, but man, like I had a great mom. And you know what? What a disservice to the life I had with her if I walked around the rest of the world just saying, no, I hate everything, hate everybody, and I'm pessimistic. And every time things get tough, I'm going to blame it on the fact that it didn't work out the way I wanted to, and I'm just going to U-turn everywhere. So the next time that something really tough, because what happens with the pessimist is that when something really tough comes in to the equation, they give up. So it's like, you can have a tragedy in your life, and then that triggers, everything is terrible, everything is this, and that stops you from moving forward in your life and your business. And what you really want to do with that is you want to say, okay, you know what, take a moment, step back, evaluate the situation, think about the lesson or the challenge that this is giving you, and look at it and say, how do I make this outcome of this entire terrible scenario, how do I make it favorable? How do I see this in a different lens? And that to me is really important, because there's a lot of terrible things that can happen, and people who have been through that in their past, we have a tendency to, as soon as something goes wrong, it's like the world just drops on us and we want to stop everything. So that's a really tough one. So I struggled with the self-doubter one and the pessimist. However, I don't think, the pessimist is the strongest one for me. The self-doubter was the strongest one for me. Is, am I good enough? Am I good enough? That's the thing that's always back in my head, because I don't have a lot of family growing up to say how great I was or anything. So I'm kind of doing it on my own as far as that goes. So you always have to look at that. So those are the 7, tendencies that we possess, that we manifest in fear. That these are the things that could come out that hold us back. Now, I'm not saying that you're going to have every one of them, like I said, but we should have most. Like in certain situations, we should have all of these. It's just what manifests, which of the 7 manifests the higher in yourself. And the truth is you know what? If all you got from this was, wow, that was really cool information, that's awesome. That's all you need to. If you've got none of these and you're like, I think I'm like friggin' nailing it, then guess what? You're a fearless mofo. All right. So it's like, that's great. That's amazing. So the truth is I hope you take a little bit from this. And, the biggest lesson that I've learned in my life is that, you know what? You have to learn to love fear. You can never get rid of it. All right. I've tried my whole life, and every single day there's something I'm afraid of, or there's something that, is scary that I'm doing. I'm going on vacation to Hawaii. I'm going to be cycling in the mountains. I'm scared. I'm scared. I'm going to be surfing. I'm scared the shark's going to eat me. Like, fear holds us back all the time. You cannot get rid of fear. But what you can do is you can learn on which one is holding you back the most, what's manifesting in you that's related to fear, that's really holding you back. And you can start to change it, which is what I like to do. Is I like to know what holds me back. How can I contribute a different outcome to it? How can I learn to change it? Because that's the first step to everything. Okay. So I'm sorry we got cut out on Facebook Live today. So I do apologize. And as you know, I'm gone next week. So hopefully, knock on wood. And so we'll be back the following Monday, which I think is Easter. So we will talk to you then, and hope you enjoyed it.